and I'm bored.
And I'm so bored of this game.
I'm so bored.
All right, welcome back, fellow Clixers, to Clicks with Clifford. I'm Clifford, as always, bringing you another Heroclix video. Today, we're going to continue the series on how to play Heroclix, and more specifically, we're going to cover the dials on each one of the figures. The dial is the part on the bottom that spins, displays a bunch of weird symbols, has a bunch of numbers. We're going to go over exactly what all of the things on the dial means between rings, set number, stats, all of that, so you can have a clear understanding of the dial. Now, before you do that, don't forget to like and subscribe if you love Heroclix and want some more Heroclix action. I'm going to zoom in on the dial, and we'll explain everything right now. Alright guys, and here we are looking straight down on a dial of my favorite character, Batman. Now you can clearly see all of the things that show on a dial. For a standard character, he has nothing out of the ordinary that you wouldn't see on any normal character. Now what we're going to do is we're going to point out a few of the things on the dial and explain exactly what they mean. We'll start with some of the easier to understand, obvious ones, and then move on to a little bit more of the complicated things that are going on here. The first thing we're going to do is take a look at the name. Okay, and the name shows up on every character in relatively the same spot. It points right here where the arrow is pointing. That's going to be the name of the character. It corresponds to their card. It's pretty self-explanatory. That is the name of the character. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to move right on over to the left, and we're going to look straight up where you see the Batman symbol and the JLA words, or letters. Now, that is what's called a team ability. Now, if you recall from the previous entry in this channel, we went over where you can find a card that shows all of the team abilities and exactly what they do. Now, the team ability will show up on the dial, indicating that they get that team ability, and it's in effect at all times, or situationally when some of them are you use them. We'll go over more on team abilities later. And then moving straight on over to the left, you'll have how many points that character costs. Sometimes you'll see multiple numbers, like in this case 100/60. Sometimes it'll just be one number. Now what this indicates is that you can either start him on his starting click or a little bit later down, and we'll get to that later here in a few seconds. And then to the left of that, you're going to have the set and rarity. In this case, he's from the JLU set. That's the Justice League Unlimited set, one of my favorite sets ever. And then the color that the tab is written on will indicate what rarity it is. And I'll throw up a picture here of each one of the rarities as we go through them. In this case, the white is common, and the green is uncommon. Next up, we have silver, which is rare. And then we have a gold color, which is super rare. And then a chase color, which is like a bronze, which also shares a similar color to that of LEs, also shown here on screen. And there is also a blue tab. It's pretty unmistakable. It means Ultra Chase. I don't have an example here, I don't think, to show you guys. But going back to this dial here of Batman, we're going to continue moving along to the left here. We have the set number. In this case, it's set number 103. And that is literally just what number in the set it is. It's typically the lower number, the lower the rarity. So if it's rarity 1, it's probably a common. And if it's up there in like the 60s, it's probably a chase, which is the highest rarity and highly sought after. In this case, we got 103, which means it's from a starter set. Anything that's numbered with 100, anything, and then any number, like 201, 202, are all LEs or anything like that, or starter sets, fast forces, anything like that. And then moving down a little bit, you'll see a star symbol or a plus symbol, and that means that they have some sort of improved ability or traits, which we'll get into approved abilities and traits when we move on to cards. But for right now, just know that those are indicators that the card will have improved abilities or some sort of trait going on. Okay, now continuing counterclockwise, you'll see 3 symbols stacked on top of each other. In this case, we have a foot, a fist, and a shield. And those represents the characteristics of how the person moves, how they attack, and their defense. Now we're going to start at the bottom here. For the shield, there are no alternative symbols to this one other than a shield with a slash through it. Now this used to mean that they were indomitable, but it's no longer used anymore. So now a standard symbol is just the shield like you see now, or this shield where it's got a little slash through it. There's no difference between the two anymore. And so right now you can just consider them one and the same. There are no other symbols used. Moving up, we have the attack symbols. Usually it's just fist. There's one other symbol that you will see commonly, and that is the fist with like a white stripe through it, meaning that the character is autonomous. And we'll cover autonomous and other symbols later. There are other symbols that you might see, such as this one, for duo figures. Now, the symbol is no longer used, but some of the older figures have them, and they've started doing legacy cards where they come up with new cards for old figures so that you can use older figures in modern games. So some of them still have the double fist, but it is no longer used. And then moving up, we have the movement symbol, this little foot thing going on right here, and that represents how they move. Now that we have ones like this, which means that basically they walk, there's a foot with like wings growing out of it, which means that they fly, and a little dolphin symbol, which means that they are swimmers. And again, when we get into more on what those mean, we'll cover those exactly there. Oh. So now that you know what those three symbols do, what we're going to do is we're going to skip past the numbers in the window and right to the windows, or to the symbols right there on the right-hand side. So typically what you'll see is a number. It could be 0, it could be us up to 12. Some might even have higher than that, and that indicates their range. So in this case, Batman has a range of 4 squares, and then next to that, you'll have 2 lightning bolts. Now, normally, on a lot of characters, you'll only see 1 lightning bolt. In this case, you see 2. I've seen 3, and that is how many targets they can target with a single attack. And this can be a close attack or a ranged attack. It does not matter. It's just how many targets they can choose for one single attack. And moving down, we have the damage symbol. So similar to the foot, the attack, and the defense symbols that we just covered previously, this symbol is your damage symbol. Now there are 3 different symbols that you'll see. You'll have the standard starburst one right here, which means they are a standard attacker. And then you'll have this one with like a big person inside a littler person, and that means that they are giant size. And then you'll have this one with like a fist smashing down, and that means that they are colossal size. And again, when we go do a deeper dive into those symbols, we'll explain exactly what that means, but for right now, that's what it indicates. Okay, and what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the numbers in the window right in the center of the figure. Now you'll notice 3 big numbers and 1 little number above the one on the bottom right there. Now, starting at the top, next to the boot in the silver gray color, is the number 10. That is their movement value. That is how many squares that character is allowed to move. Right below that in blue is their attack value, and that is when you roll to make an attack, that's the number that you're comparing against someone else's defense. And speaking of defense, in the red, we have their defense value. That is how strong they are, and that's the number you're trying to beat by rolling 2d6 to try to beat that value so that you can injure them. To the right, you'll have the little brown square, and that's your damage value. That's if you hit with an attack, that is how much damage you will deal to them. Right above it, you will see a little tiny number, and that is indicating what click number you are on. Most figures start at 1, and then later on, as you turn the dial, it'll be 2, 3, 4, so forth, and there'll be a little line. In this case, there'll be a little blue line indicating that that's where you would start him at if you did him at 60 points instead of 100. And then it keeps going until you get all the way to the end, and you'll see a line of KOs. It just says KO in every spot. That means that you have defeated that character. Okay, guys, so here we are looking at the Batman that I've been showing you pretty much this whole time. There you can see him on click number 1, indicated by the little number right above the damage value. Now I'm going to show you a demonstration of how to turn the dial, how to take damage, and what the little lines mean for starting lines. Now, if you recall, this Batman can cost either 100 or 60 points. And then there's a little line on his dial. You can see it vaguely there on the left-hand side. There's a red one, and later on down the dial, there will be a blue one. Now, what the red one does is that's where you can start him on click number 1 if you play him at 100 points. Now, if you play him at 60 points, you will turn the dial just a little bit so you see that blue line, and you want it to be on the left side there, and that's the click that you'll start him on for if you want to play him at the 60 points, the blue number. And then you're probably asking yourself what is up with the colors. So the colors on each one of the numbers indicates what power they can use in that spot. If you recall back to my video before this, the very first video in this series, I talked about the PAC, the Powers and Abilities card. What that'll do is it'll separate the movement powers, the attack powers, the defense, and the damage powers so that you can see what color in what spot means what it does. So in this case, you would look at the PAC for movement, go to the silver gray, and it would tell you that you could use running shot. Or for damage, with the brownish color down there, you would say that you could use perplex. And then it gives you a brief description of exactly what that power does. Now, one thing that you will notice is as you start taking damage on the character, you will click it. Now, the best way to click it is going to be by grabbing it from the top part or by the model if you're feeling risky, and then you will just slide the bottom, and as you're sliding it, you will see the combat values change and the powers change on the dial, until eventually, as they keep taking damage, they will hit that KO line that I showed before, indicating that you have defeated that character. Okay, Clixers, and that's going to be all for today. Today I showed you the dial for Heroclix, exactly what all of the symbols mean, what all the combat values do, all of that, so that when you look at the dial, you know more about what you're looking at. Now, if you have any questions, let me know down in the comments below. Anything at all. Next up, we're going to be covering what those symbols for the damage symbols, movement symbols, what all the different ones do, and we'll move into a little bit about explaining the PAC and how to use powers, and we might get into some maps. We'll see. As always, guys, stay bored, gamers.
But we were too bored to wait in line.